The celestial spire of diplomatic exchange rose like a crystalline beacon against the starlit backdrop of Nexus Prime, the central hub of galactic negotiations. Endless corridors of transparent alloys reflected the movement of thousands of delegates from across the known universe, each species a testament to the incredible diversity of sentient life. Princess Kira of the luminescent realms stood motionless, her diminutive frame a stark contrast to the towering alien diplomats surrounding her. At barely 4 feet tall, she represented a species known more for intellectual prowess than physical presence. Her people, the Etherians, had long been the galaxy's premier computational strategists, yet they remained perpetually overlooked in the grand theater of interstellar politics. Today marked her 5th and final diplomatic courtship ceremony. The weight of her entire civilization rested on her shoulders, a burden that would have crushed a less remarkable individual. Her royal attire shimmered with bioluminescent threads, each delicate pattern telling the story of her lineage, a history of brilliant minds that had solved some of the most complex computational challenges in galactic history. The grand chamber hummed with anticipation. Holographic displays flickered around the perimeter, showing real-time translations and diplomatic credentials. Delegates from 100 different worlds watched with a mix of curiosity and barely concealed contempt. To most, Princess Kira was nothing more than a curiosity, a tiny figure representing an even tinier civilization. The Krelthari ambassador approached, his massive reptilian form casting a shadow that could eclipse entire planets. Standing nearly 12 feet tall, he was a living monument to physical intimidation. Scales the color of burnished copper gleamed under the chamber's luminescent fields, each movement a display of raw, uncontrolled power. Princess Kira of the luminescent realm, his voice boomed, deliberately using the most formal diplomatic protocol to emphasize the distance between them. The Krelthari Confederation finds your proposal insufficient. Those words hung in the air like a physical weight. This was no mere rejection. It was a calculated public humiliation. The diplomatic corps held its collective breath. This was the 5th major galactic power to summarily dismiss the luminescent realm's attempt to secure a strategic alliance. Behind the diplomatic facade, Kira understood the true stakes. Her civilization stood at a critical juncture. Without a significant alliance, they would slowly fade into obscurity, their computational brilliance forgotten by a galaxy that valued physical might over intellectual potential. Her people had developed technologies that could revolutionize faster than light communication. They had solved quantum entanglement problems that had stumped entire research civilizations. Yet here they were, reduced to a diplomatic spectacle where physical size seemed to be the primary criteria for consideration. The Krelthari ambassador continued his public dismissal, each word carefully chosen to maximize humiliation. Your stature is but a fraction of what a true diplomatic partner requires. The Confederation seeks strength, not computational potential. Around the chamber, delegates from the Vorax Confederation, the Stellar Combine, and the Quantum Hegemony nodded in silent agreement. They had all delivered similar rejections, each more degrading than the last. But Kira was not defeated. Her eyes, deep pools of computational intensity, reflected a storm of strategic calculations. Each rejection was not an end, but a data point, another variable in a complex equation she was constantly solving. The luminescent realm's historians would later mark this moment as a turning point, not because of the rejection itself, but because of the extraordinary sequence of events it would trigger. Subtle energy signatures danced around Princess Kira, a barely perceptible field of quantum computational potential. To the untrained eye, it looked like nothing more than a slight shimmer of light. But to those who understood her civilization's capabilities, it was a warning, a promise, a declaration that physical size was merely one of countless variables in the universe's grand equation. As the Krelthari ambassador completed his dismissal, Princess Kira allowed herself the smallest of smiles. The game was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The diplomatic chamber might see her as small, insignificant, but soon they would understand that true potential cannot be measured by physical dimensions. The diplomatic lounge of Nexus Prime was a marvel of interstellar engineering. Gravity modulators allowed beings from 100 different worlds to coexist comfortably, while advanced atmospheric processors created microenvironments that could sustain the unique respiratory needs of diverse species. Jack Rodriguez moved through this complex ecosystem with a quiet confidence that set him apart from most human diplomats. At 35, he was neither the youngest nor the most decorated member of the Earth diplomatic corps, but he possessed something far more valuable: a genuine curiosity that transcended bureaucratic protocols. His background was as unique as his approach. Born to a family of systems engineers in the reconstructed megacity of New Santiago, Jack had grown up in a world that valued problem-solving over traditional diplomatic posturing. His mother, a quantum computing specialist, and his father, an ecological restoration engineer, had taught him that the most complex problems required looking beyond surface-level interactions. The recent diplomatic rejection of the luminescent realm's princess had caught his attention. While other human diplomats discussed the event as a mere footnote in galactic politics, Jack saw something deeper: a systematic failure of diplomatic engagement that went far beyond simple physical prejudice. He moved to the observation deck, a massive circular chamber with transparent walls that offered a breathtaking view of the cosmos. Holographic displays flickered with real-time data streams, tracking diplomatic communications, trade negotiations, and potential conflict zones across multiple star systems. A subtle movement caught his eye. Princess Kira stood alone, her diminutive form a stark contrast to the massive alien delegates surrounding her. Where others saw weakness, Jack's trained eye recognized something else entirely: a computational intensity that seemed to vibrate with potential. The diplomatic corps had a saying: "First contact is never about words." Jack understood this better than most. It was about understanding, truly seeing the potential behind the surface. He approached her with a deliberate, non-threatening posture. Years of cross-species diplomatic training had taught him the importance of body language, of creating a space of mutual respect. "Your recent paper on quantum entanglement communication networks," Jack said, his voice calm and genuinely interested, "it's remarkable. The way you've approached multi-dimensional signal translation is unlike anything I've seen in recent galactic research." Princess Kira turned, surprise evident in her luminescent eyes. No one, not a single diplomat in this massive chamber, had approached her with genuine intellectual interest since the public rejection. Jack continued, pulling up a holographic representation of her research on his diplomatic interface. "The method you've developed for instantaneous multi-species communication could revolutionize how civilizations interact. It's not just a technological breakthrough. It's a potential pathway to genuine understanding." The diplomatic lounge around them continued its complex dance of negotiations and subtle power plays. Delegates from 100 worlds moved like intricate pieces on a massive, living chessboard. But in this moment, only two individuals truly sought each other. Kira's initial reserve began to crack. Here was a human who saw beyond her physical limitations, who understood the true potential of her work. "Most diplomats," she said carefully, "see my research as a theoretical curiosity. They don't understand its practical applications." Jack smiled, a genuine, warm expression that spoke of intellectual partnership rather than condescension. "Most diplomats aren't engineers first. They see boundaries. I see possibilities." Their conversation began to draw subtle attention. Experienced diplomats noticed the unexpected connection: a human mid-level attaché and the recently rejected princess of a tiny civilization, deep in conversation about complex quantum communication protocols. The universe, Jack knew, was full of unexpected connections. Civilizations rose and fell based on moments just like this, when someone was willing to look beyond the obvious, to see the potential that others missed. As they spoke, neither realized they were writing the first lines of a story that would fundamentally reshape galactic diplomacy. a story of how two individuals from seemingly incompatible worlds would challenge everything the galaxy thought it knew about connection, potential, and understanding. The diplomatic lounge continued its complex ballet. But at its center, something extraordinary was beginning to take shape. The private consultation chamber was a marvel of diplomatic engineering. Quantum-dampened walls prevented external eavesdropping, while adaptive holographic interfaces could reconstruct complex scientific models in three-dimensional space. Here, away from the political theater of the main diplomatic halls, Jack and Kira began to unravel the true depth of their intellectual connection. Quantum communication networks cascaded between them like living mathematics. Jack's background in systems engineering complemented Kira's computational brilliance in ways neither had anticipated. Where most diplomats saw paperwork and protocol, they saw an intricate dance of possibility. The fundamental challenge, Kira explained, her holographic projection expanding to show multiple dimensional layers of communication protocols, isn't just about transmitting information. It's about creating a universal translation matrix that respects the unique cognitive structures of different species. Jack leaned forward, his fingers tracing the holographic pathways. Most diplomatic translation systems operate on a surface-level linguistic model. They translate words, not context. Your approach is different. You're essentially creating a cognitive bridge. The hologram shifted, revealing complex algorithmic patterns that seemed to breathe with living intelligence. Kira's people had developed computational models that went far beyond traditional communication frameworks. Each algorithm was a miniature universe of potential understanding. Their conversation defied the traditional boundaries of diplomatic discourse. Jack discovered that Kira's civilization had developed computational techniques that could predict societal interactions with near-mathematical precision. The luminescent realm wasn't just a small civilization. They were computational prophets, able to model complex social dynamics with unprecedented accuracy. Our predictive models, Kira explained, can forecast potential diplomatic outcomes with a 94.7% accuracy rate. But no one takes us seriously because of our size. Jack understood the deeper implication. Physical perception had become a fundamental barrier to true galactic understanding. Civilizations were judged by their ability to project power, not by their intellectual potential. The consultation chamber seemed to hum with their shared revelation. Jack pulled up historical diplomatic records, showing how often large militaristic civilizations had failed where smaller, more innovative societies could have succeeded. Each holographic document was a testament to the limitations of traditional diplomatic thinking. Kira's computational mind began to see Jack not just as a potential ally, but as a unique problem to be solved. Humans were an anomaly in galactic civilization, a species that seemed to defy conventional predictive models. Where most civilizations followed rigid patterns, humans introduced chaos and innovation. Your species is fascinating, she said, her holographic representation tilting slightly. Most predictive models struggle to account for human adaptability. You don't just solve problems. You reimagine the entire framework of problem solving. Jack chuckled. Is that a compliment or a critique? Both. Kira responded, her luminescent eyes reflecting complex computational patterns. In the galaxy's diplomatic ecosystem, you're an unpredictable variable. And unpredictability can be more valuable than any traditional form of power. Their conversation continued, diving deeper into the complex world of interstellar communication. They weren't just discussing a scientific problem. They were reimagining the entire concept of diplomatic interaction. Outside the consultation chamber, the diplomatic station continued its complex political dance. Delegates from 100 worlds moved like intricate pieces on a massive living chessboard. But here, in this quantum-dampened space, something extraordinary was taking shape. A partnership, a connection, a potential solution to challenges that had stumped galactic diplomats for generations. The universe, they both understood, was about to change. And it would start with a conversation most would consider impossibly complex. A tiny princess from an overlooked civilization, and a human diplomat who saw beyond traditional boundaries. Intellectual sparks danced between them, each moment a potential revolution waiting to be unleashed. The subterranean data archives of Nexus Prime were a labyrinth of information, accessible only to the most high-level diplomatic investigators. Jack Rodriguez moved through the quantum-encrypted corridors with a precision that belied his mid-level diplomatic status. Years of systems engineering had taught him that the most critical information often hid in the spaces between official narratives. Kira's computational implants, invisibly interfaced with Jack's communication systems, began parsing massive data streams. Each fragment of information was a potential piece of a complex puzzle, the systematic suppression of her civilization's diplomatic potential. The rejection patterns are too consistent to be coincidental. Kira's voice resonated through their secure communication channel. Her analytical mind was breaking down diplomatic interactions with mathematical precision. Jack's fingers danced across holographic interfaces, pulling up classified diplomatic communications spanning the last 3 decades. A disturbing pattern emerged. Civilizations similar to the luminescent realm, small in physical stature but extraordinary in computational capabilities, had been consistently marginalized. The data revealed a carefully orchestrated diplomatic strategy. Major galactic powers, the Krelthari Confederation, the Quantum Hegemony, and the Stellar Combine, had been actively suppressing technological and diplomatic advancements from smaller civilizations. It wasn't just about physical size. It was about maintaining a carefully controlled galactic hierarchy. "Look at the communication suppression protocols," Jack murmured, expanding a holographic representation of diplomatic communication restrictions. "They've created a system that fundamentally limits the ability of smaller civilizations to share their most advanced technologies." Kira's computational analysis worked in perfect synchronization. Her mind could process billions of data points simultaneously, finding connections that would take traditional investigators decades to uncover. The conspiracy went deeper than either of them initially suspected. Economic trade agreements, technological exchange protocols, diplomatic recognition, all were carefully manipulated to maintain the dominance of larger, more militaristic civilizations. "It's not just political," Kira explained, her holographic representation showing complex network diagrams. "It's a systematic approach to controlling galactic knowledge progression. By limiting the diplomatic and technological channels of smaller civilizations, they're essentially creating an artificial evolutionary barrier." Jack discovered hidden communication logs that showed how diplomatic proposals from smaller civilizations were routinely filtered, modified, or completely dismissed without proper review. The system was so sophisticated that most would never recognize the deliberate suppression. Their investigation revealed something even more shocking. The major galactic powers weren't just blocking diplomatic advancement. They were actively working to prevent smaller civilizations from forming meaningful alliances. Each rejection was part of a larger strategy to maintain a strict galactic power structure. "They fear innovation," Jack said, connecting the final pieces of their investigative puzzle. "Civilizations like yours represent an unpredictable variable in their carefully constructed system of control." The data archives seemed to pulse with the weight of their discovery. What had begun as a personal diplomatic challenge was rapidly becoming a potential galactic-level revelation. Kira's computational models began running potential scenarios. Each simulation showed the same devastating conclusion. Without intervention, her civilization, and countless others like it, would slowly be pushed into irrelevance. "We need more than just information," she said, her voice carrying a newfound determination. "We need a strategy that can break through these systematic barriers." Jack understood the implication. This was no longer just a diplomatic challenge. This was a fight for the fundamental right of civilizations to develop, to connect, to evolve. The subterranean data archives continued their silent humming, thousands of quantum-encrypted data streams flowing around them. But something had changed. A small crack had appeared in the carefully constructed facade of galactic diplomacy. And through that crack, A revolution was about to begin. The Intergalactic Council Chamber was a masterpiece of architectural impossibility. Suspended in a quantum-stabilized void between three separate star systems, the chamber defied conventional understanding of space and time. Delegates from 100 civilizations sat within adaptive environments, each precisely calibrated to their unique physiological requirements. At the center of the chamber stood the immutable challenge, a diplomatic puzzle that had remained unsolved for 3 centuries. Two ancient civilizations, the Chronos Imperium and the Stellar Concordat, had been locked in a conflict so complex that entire generations had been born and died without resolution. The challenge was deceptively simple in its statement: resolve the territorial and cultural dispute between two civilizations with completely incompatible communication systems, technological frameworks, and fundamental philosophical approaches to existence. Most diplomatic teams saw an impossible task. Jack and Kira saw an opportunity to reshape galactic understanding. The key, Kira explained, her holographic projection dancing with computational models, isn't to solve the conflict. It's to create a framework of understanding that transcends their current limitations. Jack nodded, his human intuition complementing her mathematical precision. Traditional diplomatic approaches had failed because they tried to force resolution through existing communication channels. Their strategy would be fundamentally different. The Chronos Imperium existed in a nonlinear temporal perception. Their civilization experienced time as a multidimensional landscape, where past, present, and potential futures coexisted simultaneously. Communication for them was not about sequential language, but about complex quantum state interactions. In contrast, the Stellar Concordat was a hyperlogical civilization that processed information through pure mathematical constructs. Their communication was so precise that even the slightest emotional nuance was considered a critical error. Most diplomatic teams had failed because they attempted to translate between these two systems. Jack and Kira understood that translation was impossible. They needed to create an entirely new communication framework. Kira's computational models began to generate what she called a cognitive bridge, a communication protocol that didn't translate between two systems, but created an entirely new method of mutual understanding. Jack's human creativity played a crucial role. Where pure computational thinking might have created a sterile solution, he introduced adaptive learning protocols that could evolve in real time. The Intergalactic Council watched in stunned silence as their approach began to take shape. Instead of presenting a solution, Jack and Kira were presenting a living, breathing communication ecosystem. Their protocol wasn't just a method of communication. It was a dynamic entity that could understand and adapt to the fundamental differences between the two civilizations. It learned, evolved, and created meaning where previously there had been only misunderstanding. Holographic representations began to show something unprecedented. The temporal landscapes of the Chronos Imperium started to interact with the mathematical constructs of the Stellar Concordat in ways no one had previously thought possible. "We're not solving their conflict," Jack explained to the stunned delegates. "We're giving them the ability to truly understand each other for the first time." Kira's computational models showed the potential outcomes. Each simulation revealed an exponentially increasing probability of mutual understanding. Where previous diplomatic efforts had shown conflict percentages of over 99%, their approach demonstrated potential cooperation rates that approached 87%. The chamber seemed to hold its collective breath. Delegates from 100 worlds watched as a mid-level human diplomat and a princess from a tiny civilization began to rewrite the fundamental rules of galactic diplomacy. This was more than a solution to a 3-century-old conflict. This was a demonstration of how true understanding could emerge from the most unexpected places. The ultimate test was becoming something far more profound. It was a testament to the power of seeing beyond established boundaries, of finding connection in the most unlikely of spaces. And the universe was about to change. The moment of breakthrough came not with a thunderous declaration, but with a subtle quantum resonance that rippled through the entire Intergalactic Council chamber. Jack and Kira's communication protocol began to manifest as a living, breathing entity of understanding, a computational ecosystem that defied every known diplomatic paradigm. Holographic displays erupted with cascading patterns of communication, each strand a complex negotiation between two fundamentally incompatible civilizations. The Cronus Imperium's temporal landscapes began to intertwine with the stellar Concordat's mathematical constructs in ways that seemed to defy the very laws of information exchange. "It's not translation," Kira explained to the stunned delegates, her voice calm and precise. "It's transformation." The protocol they had developed was more than a communication system. It was a sentient bridge of understanding, capable of learning, adapting, and evolving in real time. Where previous diplomatic efforts had used rigid frameworks, this solution breathed with living intelligence. Jack watched the holographic representations with a mix of scientific fascination and human intuition. Each interaction was a delicate dance of computational complexity and creative problem-solving. The Cronus Imperium's representatives, beings who experienced time as a multidimensional landscape, began to find common ground with the hyperlogical mathematicians of the stellar Concordat. The breakthrough went beyond simple conflict resolution. They were witnessing the birth of an entirely new way of understanding interstellar communication. Delegates from 100 worlds leaned forward, their various sensory apparatuses focused intently on the unfolding miracle. The Kreltheri ambassador, who had previously dismissed Kira so publicly, now watched with a mixture of shock and growing respect. Computational models showed the conflict resolution probability rising exponentially. Where previous diplomatic attempts had shown conflict rates of over 99%, their approach demonstrated cooperation potential that approached 87.6% and continued to climb. The key, Jack explained, was to stop trying to translate between two incompatible systems. Instead, we created a new system that could understand both. Kira's computational implants worked in perfect synchronization, generating real-time adaptations that refined the communication protocol with each passing moment. It was less a technology and more a living entity of understanding. The territorial dispute that had consumed 3 centuries of galactic history began to dissolve, not through compromise, but through a fundamental reimagining of how two civilizations could perceive each other. The Cronus Imperium experienced the conflict resolution as a multi-dimensional temporal event, seeing potential futures branching and merging. The stellar Concordat processed it as a perfect mathematical equation, each variable finding its ideal resolution. Unexpected connections emerged. The Cronus Imperium's fluid temporal perception revealed complex emotional nuances that the stellar Concordat had never before comprehended. In turn, the Concordat's precise mathematical thinking provided a structural framework that gave context to the Imperium's seemingly chaotic temporal experiences. Jack recognized something profound happening. This was more than a diplomatic solution. This was a fundamental expansion of galactic consciousness. The Intergalactic Council chamber transformed. What had begun as a diplomatic challenge was becoming a moment of species-wide evolution. Delegates from civilizations across the galaxy watched as 2 individuals, a human diplomat and a princess from a tiny civilization, rewrote the fundamental rules of interstellar communication. "We're not just resolving a conflict," Kira said, her luminescent eyes reflecting complex computational patterns. "We're demonstrating that understanding is the most powerful technology in the universe." The protocol continued to evolve, each moment a testament to the power of seeing beyond established boundaries. Civilizations that had been locked in conflict for centuries began to find common ground, not through force or compromise, but through a radical new approach to mutual understanding. As the holographic displays continued their intricate dance, one thing became clear: the galaxy would never be the same again. The aftermath of their diplomatic breakthrough sent shockwaves through the galactic political landscape. Jack Rodriguez and Kira stood at the center of a transformative moment, their partnership challenging every established notion of diplomatic engagement. In the grand reception hall of the Intergalactic Council, protocol dictated traditional hierarchical seating arrangements. But Jack and Kira had other plans. They chose to stand together, their positioning a deliberate statement about the nature of true collaboration. Representatives from the Krell Confederation, those who had previously dismissed Kira so publicly, now watched with a mixture of confusion and growing respect. The diplomatic landscape had fundamentally shifted, and they were struggling to understand how two individuals from seemingly insignificant backgrounds had accomplished what entire diplomatic corps had failed to do for centuries. Partnership isn't about physical compatibility, Kira explained during a pivotal press conference. It's about the ability to see potential where others see only limitations. Jack's human intuition complemented her computational precision. Where traditional diplomatic partnerships focused on physical strength or territorial advantages, their collaboration demonstrated a radical new approach. They weren't just solving problems, they were reimagining the entire concept of problem solving. The luminescent realm, once overlooked and marginalized, suddenly found itself at the center of galactic attention. Computational research centers that had been chronically underfunded now became focal points of intense scientific interest. Smaller civilizations across the galaxy began to see a new path forward, a way to leverage intellectual potential over physical might. Their proposed diplomatic partnership went beyond traditional marriage arrangements. It was a comprehensive intellectual alliance that challenged every existing diplomatic framework. They weren't seeking to merge territories or create a conventional political union. Instead, they were proposing a new model of collaborative problem-solving that could revolutionize interstellar relations. Diplomatic protocols were rewritten. The rigid systems that had previously marginalized smaller civilizations began to crumble. Civilizations were now being evaluated not by their physical size or military capabilities, but by their innovative potential and ability to collaborate. Jack's background in systems engineering proved crucial. He understood that true innovation came from the spaces between established systems, the liminal zones where traditional thinking broke down and new possibilities emerged. Kira's computational models began to generate predictive scenarios that demonstrated the long-term potential of their approach. Each simulation showed exponential improvements in interstellar cooperation, conflict resolution, and technological advancement. The Intergalactic Council found itself in uncharted territory. The diplomatic challenge that had seemed impossible had not only been resolved, but had fundamentally transformed the understanding of interstellar communication. "We're not creating a new alliance," Jack explained during a pivotal diplomatic session. "We're creating a new way of understanding alliance itself." Their partnership became a symbol of something far greater than a simple diplomatic arrangement. It represented a fundamental shift in how civilizations could interact, a model of collaboration that prioritized mutual understanding over competitive advantage. Smaller civilizations across the galaxy began to find their voice. Research centers that had been chronically underfunded now became focal points of intense scientific interest. The computational models developed by the luminescent realm suddenly became critically important to galactic advancement. The Krell ambassador, who had once publicly humiliated Kira, now sought her counsel. The very institutions that had worked to suppress smaller civilizations were now desperately trying to understand the new diplomatic paradigm. As galactic news streams broadcast their story, a powerful message emerged. Size didn't determine potential. Collaboration could overcome seemingly insurmountable differences. Innovation could come from the most unexpected places. Jack and Kira stood as living proof that the most powerful technology in the universe wasn't a weapon or a computational system. It was the ability to truly understand one another. The galaxy watched and waited, knowing that everything was about to change. 5 standard galactic cycles had passed since the remarkable diplomatic breakthrough. The universe looked fundamentally different, a transformation that began with 2 individuals who refused to accept the limitations imposed by traditional thinking. The Collaborative Research Institute stood as a testament to their vision. Located in a quantum-stabilized region between multiple star systems, it was more than a research facility. It was a living embodiment of a new way of understanding interstellar cooperation. Jack Rodriguez walked through the Institute's central hall, his steps accompanied by the subtle hum of computational fields. Holographic displays tracked ongoing research projects from civilizations that had once been considered too small or insignificant to contribute to galactic advancement. Kira's computational systems were integrated into every aspect of the facility. Where traditional research centers focused on individual achievements, this institute celebrated collaborative potential. Young researchers from 100 different worlds worked side by side, their unique perspectives creating solutions that no single civilization could have imagined alone. The institute had become a beacon of hope for smaller civilizations. Research teams that had once been marginalized now found themselves at the forefront of galactic innovation. Computational models developed by the luminescent realm had become the standard for interstellar communication, replacing the rigid systems that had dominated for centuries. The true power of innovation, Jack often told visiting diplomats, isn't about individual brilliance. It's about creating spaces where different forms of brilliance can intersect. Their partnership had become more than a diplomatic success story. It was a fundamental reimagining of how civilizations could interact. The rigid hierarchies that had once dominated galactic politics had been replaced by a more fluid, collaborative model. The Krell-Theri Confederation, once the most militaristic of galactic powers, had undergone its own transformation. Their diplomatic approach now prioritized intellectual potential over physical intimidation. The very civilization that had once publicly humiliated Kira now sought her guidance on collaborative research initiatives. Computational models showed a dramatic reduction in interstellar conflicts, where previous diplomatic approaches had maintained tension through misunderstanding. The new communication protocols created pathways of mutual comprehension. Jack watched as a research team composed of representatives from 5 different civilizations worked on a complex quantum communication project. Their differences, in physical form, cognitive processing, and cultural background, were no longer barriers. They were sources of strength. The Intergalactic Council had been completely restructured. Representation was now based on innovative potential rather than physical size or military might. Smaller civilizations that had once been voiceless now played crucial roles in galactic decision-making. Kira's computational systems continued to evolve, creating predictive models that could anticipate and prevent potential conflicts before they could emerge. It was a radical approach to diplomacy, one that saw understanding as the most powerful form of conflict prevention. Their personal partnership had become a symbol of something far greater. They hadn't just solved a diplomatic challenge. They had demonstrated a new way of existing in the universe, a model of collaboration that transcended physical, cultural, and cognitive boundaries. Young diplomats from across the galaxy studied their approach. The rigid training programs of the past had been replaced by educational models that emphasized adaptability, mutual understanding, and the power of seeing potential where others saw only differences. Jack reflected on their journey. What had begun as a chance encounter in a diplomatic lounge had transformed the entire galactic community. The universe had discovered that true strength came not from physical might or territorial control, but from the ability to truly understand one another. The Collaborative Research Institute's Central Hall displayed a holographic timeline of their journey. It wasn't a story of individual achievement, but a testament to the power of unexpected connections. As the quantum-stabilized lights of the facility shifted, casting complex computational patterns across the hall, Jack understood something profound. Their greatest achievement wasn't the diplomatic breakthrough or the research innovations. It was the demonstration that the most powerful force in the universe was the ability to see beyond limitations, to find connection in the most unexpected places. The galaxy continued to evolve, a living testament to the power of mutual understanding.